Hi guys, today we're sharing a testimony of faith, and I have Shelley Meche'tte with me today, and she's going to tell us about her story and why she's a testimony. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course, you can go ahead and share your story with us today.
I'm so excited to be able to share my story. I am literally a walking testimony as somebody who really enjoys the hustle. I don't know about anybody else, but I really I'm that person who enjoys hustling, getting things done. I have the ideas, I have the faith, I have the motivation to get all of these things done. But I've also been that person who I felt like what's missing. What's not happening. I feel like I'm going in circles. I feel like I'm not always fulfilled. Even in the successes that I've had in my life, there's always been something where it's like, Lord, why am I not where exactly I feel like I should be? And what's so crazy is it took three strokes, you guys, three strokes in one day for me to actually sit down and for God to really be able to help me understand that yes, I had successes in my life. Yes, I was grinding in my life. Yes, I was doing things that I felt that I had been called to do. But what God revealed to me is that there were a lot of things that I just wasn't in alignment with. And it's not that I was doing something wrong. It's not that I wasn't doing what I felt God called me to do. It's that I hadn't allowed God to be in the driver's seat. And so that missing that I had in me, that those things that I felt like, why do I feel like I'm not on purpose? Why do I feel like I'm striving all the time? God was able to show me through these strokes that the striving that I was doing was not leading to the aligning and the success. So let me go back to the day of those strokes. And so I woke up, actually, let me go back just a little bit. I have had migraines since I was a teenager. And so, me having these headaches that led up to me going to the hospital, it wasn't anything strange. It wasn't anything like, oh my gosh, why am I having these headaches? But what happened is the headaches were becoming more frequent. And yes, they were becoming a little more intense, but I kind of blew them off as I probably need a little stronger medication. I just need something, a little bit more. But these headaches have been happening for probably a few months now, where they were just a little more frequent. And so in May of 2025, I had gone to an event with my family. It was an awards event, and I got a sharp, sharp pain. It was so bad, you guys, that it made me jump. It made me jump back into my seat. And my mom, and my family, they were like, oh my gosh, are you okay? What's happening? My daughter ended up giving me some medication because, again, I'm not looking at these as signs that something is wrong. And so I noticed that as I was walking, I was a little bit off a little bit, but the pain was so intense. I still didn't really say, hey, this could be a problem. I just figured, I really do need something a little stronger. My eyes were a little sensitive and I was a little wobbly. But as the night went on, things were fine. My eyes were better. I felt better. And so I just made a mental note to go back and make sure that I get in touch with my neurologist. But before that happened, on the evening of May 26th, that same sharp pain stabbed me again in my head. To once again, I grabbed my head because it was just so intense. I hadn't felt anything quite like that before. And I said, I'm going to go into ER the next morning. And so the next morning I did. I went into ER and let them know all of my symptoms. But just to show you how much I was not panicking over this, I got up that morning, y'all. I made snacks because y'all know ER is all day. So I got up, I made snacks. I, had conversation with the family here and there. My husband said, hey, do you want me to take you? And I'm like, no, it's not a big deal. I'm fine. I didn't have any pain that morning. So I went to ER. I watched TikToks, y'all. I was laughing. People was probably in ER like, what is she here? I was having a good time by myself. And when I was called to the back, the ER doctor on call, she did all of the normal tests and I hit all of the markers. Everything was fine. And so it looked like there was no issue until she asked me to say the word world. Now, I don't know what it is about this word world, but when she began to ask me if I could spell the word and if I could say the word, that's when everything went downhill. I was thinking about this word and I kept going, huh? Huh? What is it that you're saying? I heard what she said. I thought that I was understanding what she said, but when I tried to get it out, the only thing that came out of my mouth was, ooh, ooh. And I instantly began to cry because I just couldn't understand what was happening. I had hit every single marker, everything that she was asking me to do until it came to this one word. And as she continued to wait for me to try to gather how to say this word, I literally saw the word world in my head and I saw it disappear, starting from the from the D backwards all the way to the W. The word just completely disappeared. And it was at that moment that I fell back into my first stroke, not knowing, not understanding, not having any idea of what was happening. When I could see everything that was going on, I saw everyone chaotic running around me. I heard all of the different words. The doctor was snapping in my face, calling my names, and there was just no response. I was completely glassed. My eyes were just fixated, and I could just hear everything going on around me. When I finally came to, I called my family to let my family know what had happened. And by this time, I had been transferred back to another room in the ER so that I could begin getting some tests. And while I was on the phone with my mom, I went into my second stroke. And so she literally heard me on the phone die out. I literally heard the speed of my words begin to slow down. And when I came out of that stroke, I had lost my speech. And so every time I open my mouth, I'm a miracle because I lost speech after that second stroke and I lost the connection. And so even though I could, when the nurse came in to give me tests and to do cognitive tests, I could see exactly what was going on, and I knew what was going on the pictures and the frames and everything that she showed me, but the connection just was not there. And I felt that my words weren't there. I couldn't gather my thoughts. Things weren't coming to me. And it was so emotional for me because I am a speaker and I am a woman of many words, y'all. And to not be able to gather words, to not be able to communicate, to not be able to express my thoughts, it was just so much that was happening on me at one moment that the only way I could express myself is just through more tears, more tears. And the reality came to me at that moment. What am I going to do? I've worked my entire life. I've loved working my entire life. I've hustled my entire life. I've been in the stride my entire life, and I have no idea what's going to happen to me at this moment. Who am I if I'm not a speaker? What is my purpose in this world? What do I have to offer? And all of that crumbled right in my face because I had no idea. Nothing was certain now. And I had no idea what my life was going to look like now. I had no idea if I was even going to be me because I couldn't even communicate in the way that I could minutes ago. And so you would think that that was the worst part. And for me at that moment, it was until probably maybe 20 minutes later or 30 minutes later, as I was talking to my mom and my husband, who were both inside of the room at that time, I felt my body fall back and I felt my eyes go to the back of my head and I fell out into my third stroke. And this is the one that primarily that almost killed me. This is the one where I literally felt my life draining from me and I began to freeze cold because the blood and the life was literally leaving my body. And during this time, because I really thought that at this time I was really gonna die, I reached up to my husband to let him know, I love you, because I really thought that this was the end. I began to feel my body, my spirit separate from my body. And as the life was pressing out of me, I knew that because it kind of, I equate it to like squeezing water out of a sponge. And once you reach the end of that sponge, it's completely dry, everything is completely gone. And so that's kind of what I equated to, that this squeezing was in my body and it was pressing the very life out of my body. And I could just feel it. And it went from my neck and it started going all the way down. And then the left side of my body went completely numb. And so it went down my left and then across my chest. And I went completely numb. And at that moment, I knew that if I come out of this, that I would be completely paralyzed from across my chest down. But after I began to feel the life drained from my body, and I became just freezing cold, like somebody had just pushed me into a river of ice cold water, and I just couldn't move because I was just so cold. That's when like I said, I began to feel my spirit separate from my body. And I just rested. And I rested in God's peace and in God's love. And, and I just began to cry because I knew, not cry because life so much was coming to an end, but because I was going to be leaving, my family and everything I knew. And it was a weird place to be in because I felt so much peace. And and I was fighting in two worlds. There was a world of peace and love and just God wrapping his arms around me. But then there was still this life that I knew that I was leaving, that I knew that I was coming away from. But in that moment, I tell you, I wish there was another word that I could use to explain how God wrapped himself around me to let me know that he was still there, even in the midst of that. And in the process of my life leaving, all of a sudden, without any reason, without any rhyme, I began to chuckle. Something began to tickle me in my spirit. And as I began to laugh, everything stopped. The squeezing stopped, the separating stopped, and then something came out of my mouth. And I said, God said no. And at the moment I said, God said no, everything began to reverse in my body. I began to start speaking life into myself. I began saying, I shall live and not die, and I will proclaim the mighty works of the Lord. And I began to just speak that over and over and over again. And all of a sudden, the life began to come back into my body. The warmth began to come back into my body. My family started wrapping me around in covers and clothes because again I was so cold, and they began wrapping me up to get my body warm again. And then God began to restore the feeling in the left side of my body. And while it was left weak, I was still able to walk, trembled, but walk, weak, but walk. And then God began to restore my mouth again and to restore my tongue again. They put a monitor on my head for 24 hours. And when they came back and said that there were no signs of anything. I had no brain clots. I had no brain bleeds. I had no brain damage at all after all that had happened. But what God showed me is that there's purpose. There's purpose still in my life. And what he wanted me to do is he wanted me to tell my story of the testimony of how he brought me back to life. And not just that, but for us to stop chasing the shiny objects, stop chasing the next thing, stop striving, stop hustling, stop grinding, and start aligning. And when we align with who God has called us to be and the purpose that he has called us for, then not only will we find success in our lives and in our business, but we'll find soul fulfilling a soul fulfilling life and a soul fulfilling business and a soul fulfilling relationship and a soul fulfilling family dynamic is in the alignment and the purpose that God has given, and not the grinding and the striving and the hustle that we've been chasing. And I am a living testimony that God still heals, God still provides, and God still has purpose for you and for where you are in your life. And I'm just excited about who He has called me to be in this next stage of my life.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's truly a moving story, and it's not just a story, right? It's really your life experience, and
Yes.
it really resonates as a spiritual experience mostly than really even a physical one, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the way you narrate it, it happened in different steps, right?
Yeah.
And it got to the step of you making a decision in your own spirit to follow through and have faith, right? And God says
Yes.
that that's how we gain kingdom, that's how we gain eternal life by faith in Him, by believing.
But
And
yes, confessing and our faith in Him.
amen. And
Yes.
I really want to point out that it's really interesting that you mentioned the word world, and that's where it started to become a stumble for you, because I
Mm-hmm.
believe that may be significant to also what you spoke about hustling and chasing materials. And we become very intertwined with the world around us to the point
Oh, absolutely.
that we forget our spirit. We forget to feed our spirit, right? We forget to maintain our prayers, our faith, and our belief in God. And I think that's a good example of how you mentioned that the strokes kind of reminded you to slow down and actually focus more
Mm-hmm.
on alignment and
Mm-hmm.
purpose. Because
Yes, absolutely.
many of the
Mm-hmm.
things that we focus on, although it's part of our experience, right? Such as having a job and paying for bills and different things. They're not
Mm-hmm.
very meaningful to others, and at times not even meaningful to us. So I wonder if you could talk to us a bit about how you felt once you understood that
Mm-hmm.
that's what was required of you was to fall into alignment and find purpose, even though you experienced this difficult times and having three strokes in the same day, and how that affected you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make sure that I let people know that, just because you're out here and you're working and you're very dedicated to those things, that doesn't mean that you're out of alignment. Your job where you are could be exactly where God wants you to be. When we think about purpose and alignment, I don't want people to look at it and say, "Oh, well, I only have a 9 to 5. I should be doing something more." Absolutely not. What we should be doing is asking God, where am I supposed to be? Where am I supposed to be aligned? Sometimes that job is exactly where you're supposed to be because you're going to make the most impact in that 9 to 5. Sometimes baking cookies for the neighborhood kids, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. That is your alignment. That is your purpose. You're trying to start a big bakery, and you keep getting frustrated and you keep having a hard time and nothing is going right because you keep stepping out of the alignment to try to have this huge bakery when God has called you to use your gift of baking to just serve your community. And that's a big thing, to be able to serve your community, to be able to give to the kids in your neighborhood. You don't know how that's going to make impact for many, many years to come. And so I want people to understand that just because one person's alignment is in speaking or podcasting or being an author, that doesn't mean that that's everyone's thing. One person is going to climb Mount Everest, for whatever reason, but that doesn't mean that it's yours. So the thing is, I never want people to think that they have to do something so grand and extraordinary by the world's standard, because whatever it is that God has called you to do, baby, understand that it is extraordinary. Every time you put that content out, if that's what God has called you to do, then you put it out knowing that it is purposeful. And so in my case, it's not that I was ever walking around not including God in whatever I was doing. It's that I really feel like the things that I was doing, I think I am that person. Where's this mass thing, Lord? Where's this big thing? Why am I still feeling so unfulfilled? And I think for me, experiencing those strokes, God just said the reason why you feel unfulfilled is because the things that you're doing is not that they're bad, they're just not aligned. And so I could go out and have 50 speaking engagements, but if I didn't take time to pray and ask God, which speaking engagement am I supposed to be at? Then you know what? I could have missed 3 women who I was supposed to speak life into, because I was off speaking on stage A, B, and C, and I was supposed to be speaking on stage Z. So it's about us taking what God has called us to do and asking God, where do I go with it? What opportunities do I take with it? What steps do I take? And that's probably the greatest thing that I learned in my strokes, because I didn't get to have a roadmap. God didn't give me a roadmap. And I am a very precise person. And so I am an ABC person. I need to have some details, girl. I need to know where we going, what we doing, how long we going to be there. And so when God didn't do that for me, I was just like, hello, what's the problem? As the direction was just given, do this. Now, once you finish doing that, then we'll do this. And once you finish doing that, then we'll do this. And the first thing that God told me to do was give the testimony. And I'm like, okay, well, what we do after that, Lord? I like details, and I didn't get details. What I got is to learn to trust the step of the alignment. And so my next step was write the book. And that's where I'm at now, writing the book and putting the book out there. Well, I've written the book, and now the book is out there. And now I'm trusting God to align the women that He wants me to connect with and work with, because nobody should have to experience 3 strokes before they experience the alignment and purpose that God has called them for. We don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. We can hear from God before that. And that's not to say that different things are not going to happen in life, because life is life. But when we know that we're where we've been called to be, then what we can do is we can take off some of that heaviness, because we know that God is in control. Even for my day, forget about the big things. Even in my day, I want to be more flexible in my day to say, here's my day, Lord, but if you called me for something else, let me know. If you've called me to bless somebody with a phone call, I was planning to leave at 10 o'clock. But if you put somebody on my heart, then let me be so in tune and aligned with what my purpose is for the day, that I can say, okay, I can push this off for an hour. Let me make sure that I do what God has called me to do this day. So that's pretty much where I've been trying to be more intentional. I was already an intentional person, but I'm trying to be even more intentional to say, Lord, where have you called me to be this day, this week? As I lay out my schedule, Lord, you be in the midst of my schedule, versus me laying out my schedule and be like, all right, Lord, bless it. Let me invite God into it. Let me set intentions for my day. Let me make sure that I'm more flexible throughout my day. Let me invest in rest and renewal throughout my day. Let me let go of grind and hustle mentality and pick up alignment and grace throughout my day. And then let me engage in those things that God has given to me as talents and gifts and hobbies. That's where we're going to find soul fulfilling moments and a soul fulfilling life and business.
You mentioned intention, right? Because it's really about being righteous and also being of servitude for somebody else, not just yourself.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
also
Absolutely.
also the renewal part, specifically because you've mentioned women. I want to point out that a
Mm.
lot of times we're expected to be involved in so many different areas that we don't get to really
Yes,
rest. We don't get to really
right.
take the time to find that alignment and recognize what our talents are, what our gifts are, because,
Yes,
we have to be mothers, we have to be wives, we have to be employees, and, we're also at the point where we need to understand that we are spirit too, right? We are,
absolutely.
part of a community, as you said, and we have a duty to be
Hmm.
involved in those areas also, not only the ones that we have made a responsibility for ourselves, but also the ones that God wants to give us, because all of us can be used.
Yes,
So I really appreciate
absolutely.
your message. I believe it's a really great one, especially because our health can be affected by stress and
Hmm.
how quickly we
Absolutely.
move among every single day. And, slowing down, meditation, prayer, it really goes a long way. And
Yes.
I want us to know more about your book and how you started writing it, how we can find it, and also anything you'd like us to know about it.
Yes, absolutely. As I've stated, my book was born out of these experiences, this one day experience, and not only that, but the aftermath, of this experience and how God really took me through, and then how He allowed me an opportunity to rediscover Him, to rediscover purpose, and to redirect me in the way that He would want me to go. And so that is what the book is about. It's a walkthrough of not just my testimony as a stroke survivor, but through the eyes of my family. And so that's what's unique about this book. You don't just get my story, you get how my daughters viewed it, what they saw. You get my husband's perspective, what he saw. You get the heartbreak of my mother as she watched her daughter that she believed was about to pass away. So you get a perspective from everyone, because I wanted people to know that when you go through any type of a crisis in your life, it's never just you going through. There's always someone else who goes through with you. There's always a caretaker. There's always a family member. There's always someone. And I wanted those who may not have experienced this before, but who have maybe gone through it with a family member. I wanted you to know that I see you too. And this book is a dedication for you as well. And so you can get this book on Amazon. God Said No, or you can get it on my website, which is Shelley Meche'tte, my name, SHELLEYMECHETTE.com.
Thank you so much for being here today and to
Thank you.
answer the call from God, answer the call from others to share just your experience and be in alignment yourself. It took you a big experience to get here, and it's really appreciated. And I hope that you know that what you're doing is really meaningful. It really touched me specifically, the way you described your experience, right? And how you felt it not only in your spirit but in your body when it all changed for you, when God changed things for
Yeah.
you. And it really is such a great story. And I just want to thank you for being here. It was really nice meeting you.
Thank you. You too. Thank you so much.
No problem.